So we are now recording. I have been recording most of the meetings that we have been having, and I have been uploading them to YouTube. So if you do miss a meeting, you can find us on YouTube now.
And kind of set an idea of, if your chapter is looking for a project that you want to do in an area that maybe, in the Saluda area versus kind of going upstate, kind of the steps that I've seen work in that type of project development. And we actually have another speaker here tonight that's going to help me with this presentation in that part. His name's Conor Reynolds. He is the former president of the Upper Chattahoochee Chapter. And so I'm going to kind of lay out here the steps. And then at the end, Conor is going to kind of give you all a practical example of how their chapter based out of Atlanta has kind of gone through this in an area. Again, everybody's familiar with the upper portion of North Georgia and the trout there. But their chapter's right in Atlanta with the Chattahoochee River right in their backyard, and how they kind of looked at that area and said, we're going to invest here, and how they started with this small vision. And over the past 2 years have really been able to grow that vision and make it something pretty spectacular for a chapter to be engaged in. So Conor will join us here after I'm done speaking. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. Let's see, there we go. And I kind of just call this talk, improving your local watershed. Again, focusing on, your chapter is in a specific area, you have your own specific waters of interest, and how you can work that local mission, and then tie into that kind of that regional picture, upstate South Carolina into North Carolina, how building that base kind of helps you with that. Let me see. So I like to start out just with an example, just kind of walking through Trout Unlimited. Many of you are longtime volunteers, but many of you might not have had a lot of experience with the overall organization. And I start here because Trout Unlimited, like ogres, have many layers. So my dated Shrek reference. But Trout Unlimited is a layered organization. And what I mean by that is that we kind of have many layers in this organization, starting with TU national staff. So we have staff members whose roles are really focused on carrying out the TU mission at that high level, finding the biggest priority projects for the organization to invest a lot of time in, invest a lot of national focus in, and generally run the overall organization. So, our CEO, Chris Wood, is this national level staff. A lot of our finance people, our general counsel, these are our TU national staff level employees. Moving down a step from that, we have TU regional staff. So all across the United States, Trout Unlimited has, full-time staff members, seasonal staff members working in regions, working on priority waters in these different regions and priority watersheds, trying to invest a lot of time, help develop projects, help get grants, help get volunteers engaged in these areas. So TU regional staff. And then one of the biggest differences between TU and a lot of other conservation organizations in the world is that we have an amazing grassroots. So unlike a lot of these other conservation organizations, our grassroots, you all operate a little independently. You're investing locally. You're raising money for local projects. You're getting your hands dirty. You're doing a lot more locally than I think just about any conservation organization in this country. So our TU grassroots is really what sets us apart from the rest of the conservation organization landscape. So regionally, the Southeast region currently has 2 staff members. Many of you know Andy Brown. He is the Southern Appalachians Coldwater Conservation Manager. And then myself and the second one, I'm the Southeast Project Coordinator now, had a title change. But we have been it for the Southeast. And when I say the Southeast, it's Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia is kind of our focal region. So what do we do in this region? Andy is really heavily invested in project building and getting conservation work done on the ground. So in North Carolina, he has two main focal areas, the Wilson Creek watershed, and then what we call the Sky Island area, which is really this immense area that encompasses the Davidson watershed, the Mills watershed, the Pigeon watershed, Tuck watershed, down into like the Upper Colasaja and over into the North Fork French Broad. So we have these two areas, and Andy has been heavily working to build projects in these areas, put conservation on the ground, build connections with people there, but also has been involved in some of our other areas. He helped get another project in Tennessee, just northeast of Great Smoky Mountain National Park. It's an aquatic organism passage project there. He's also been involved in South Carolina, working with the Forest Service and DNR there. We'll be doing some wood installation into streams, so dropping trees into streams to actually help build habitat for trout. Has worked on AOP projects, is partnering with everybody on the dam removal in a Pigpen Branch. So Andy's been, working to kind of get these projects going, bring funds in, and manage them and get these projects completed. My role started focused in volunteer operations with more of a kind of working with the chapters and helping them out role, and is kind of involved into this dual role where I've shifted more towards working in that same project landscape with Andy, focused on Tennessee right now, working in North Carolina, helping out in South Carolina, building relationships in North Georgia, trying to get some of these projects done, but with an eye on engaging our grassroots members and using these to bring new members, new volunteers into the TU landscape. So I do all sorts of different things from, managing aquatic organism passage projects, working on wood installation, managing some of our new staff, but also, again, answering questions from chapter members. If somebody says, hey, I want to change from this chapter to that chapter, a lot of times it's easier for me. You send me an email, I can get it done usually pretty quick. Sometimes when you go up to that national vol ops staff level, you can kind of get lost in a lot of things going on and take a little bit longer. So I'm kind of serving this dual role where I'm, trying to get more conservation going, get more people involved in the conservation while also still supporting and helping build our grassroots in the Southeast. This, in a week, this picture is going to be dated because we just hired a field manager, 1-year term position, where their job is going to be on ground, working on projects, making sure they happen. And this summer, we actually have 2 North Carolina interns as well. So we're excited to see more staffing coming into the region to support everything that's going on down here. So in the Southeast region, Ken, kind of just showing you those focal areas we talked about. On the left, that's our Sky Island area. You can kind of see this is tiny little text, sorry about this. This is our Sky Island area. Brevard is in kind of the middle right, then Silva is on the left near Trout Unlimited. So you can kind of see that landscape there. The middle picture is Wilson Creek watershed. A lot of you are familiar with that. And then on the right, that's actually kind of our 3 main focal areas that we've developed in Tennessee. Again, northeast of Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and then 2 in the far northeast corner, the Doe River unit. Doe River is a tributary of the Watauga. And then that Ridge and Valley unit is around the Beaver Dam Creek, which I heard Mike Waddell, you talking about that earlier. So that's Beaver Creek, Stony Creek area for those that are familiar. This is something that's been, that Andy and I have been working on, is kind of these priority waters identification, working with the local grassroots, working with Forest Service agencies to kind of pick these best of the best areas in the states. This is something that's going to be coming with that new strategic plan. We haven't officially released our strategic plan yet, but one thing that's going to be happening is we're going to be working with local volunteers, your agencies, to kind of identify these priority waters in every state that kind of represent this best of the best for wild and native trout. So excited to be doing that in the coming year or two. Some of the other things I do, one of the other major things I do actually is work on what we call our community science program. And this is something we really got started in North Carolina. And the community science, typically called citizen science, this is getting those volunteers out to help gather data for prioritization. So in North Carolina, we started with our aquatic organism passage or stream barrier crossing surveys, which some of you actually took that SARP course already, and a survey focused on identifying sources of sedimentation. So we've been working on getting volunteers from chapters, getting volunteers from the local universities, other conservation organizations. We get them out, we train them on the different survey protocols, and then launch them out and kind of guide them and say, here's, the most important road or the most important trail that we want done, and are kind of working systematically through those focal areas to create maps that show where are the barriers, where do we see sediment getting into the streams, how does this map with trout distribution in the area, and the ultimate goal is for both of those focal areas to have a conservation plan where we can use this data that these volunteers have collected and say, here are the highest priority projects. Here are projects that if we do one and then the other, it's compounding benefits. Andy wants to see, 40 different projects come out of these conservation plans that we've identified, and then we can work with the partners, we can work with the local chapters to be putting these conservation projects on the ground all together. So yeah, we're still in the midst of this. Honestly, like everything else, due to COVID, that kind of got slowed down. We were hoping to be done last year, but we have an extension. We're working on finalizing data collection in Sky Island, and then I'm working on finalizing or creating all the maps. Wilson Creek's been done. We had some great volunteers involved in the Wilson Creek area. And so working to finalize all the mapping and all the data analysis for Wilson Creek as well. All right. So that's just kind of a quick run through of kind of like, what my job is, what I'm doing with TU at the current moment, and that focus of kind of what my job is at the current moment. So wanted to kind of talk about, like we said with TU, there's many layers of TU. There's many layers when you're looking at doing watershed improvement. So be it in one of these focal areas or be it as a chapter, looking at that lower Saluda River and saying, we want to make improvements here. We want to make this river a better place for fish and wildlife. There's many different layers that happen. And again, a bunch of you are familiar with this. You've been doing it for a long time. But maybe, this is a refresher, or maybe this is something just good for people to hear. So the first thing that we found in our work in this area is that one of the first steps you can take is filling the gaps. And what I mean by that is filling the knowledge gaps or identifying areas where, is there something we need to know, but we don't. So if we look to like our community science program, we can go piecemeal different things here and there and just start throwing projects on the ground. But what don't we know? We don't know where the barriers are. We don't know where the major sedimentation sources are, or how they align. So we kind of worked to fill the gaps. So, with the sedimentation, another project I'm working on is looking to see if we can convert a low head dam and get cold water coming off of it from the bottom instead of water from the top, which is super warm. So we're filling the gaps there. We're working with partners to come up with and model, is there enough cold water there? But everything starts with, figuring out what don't you know? What do we need to know to actually make effective plans and get stuff done, fill the gaps. And this is where things like community science live. So that aquatic organism passage protocol that you all were just trained on and that you're going to do trainings in the future, that is something that's out there to help fill those knowledge gaps to identify where you need to be working. Another tool in the toolkit here, also based on that Survey 123 app that's on your phone, is Trout Unlimited's Rivers survey. This is a little less intense than the Southeast Aquatics Partnerships survey for barriers, but basically it allows any angler, any river user really, to document where potential problems are occurring. And we could honestly do a whole nother night just training on Rivers app, So I'm not going to go into it too much, but basically it's like you can document sedimentation issues, you can document stream bank issues, you can mark and say, this culvert, this is a perch culvert that might be a problem. Here's where livestock are getting into a stream. Rivers is really a tool that we'd love to see more chapters using, because it kind of is a low level first pass. Like, here we can document where some of these issues are. Let me see. Somebody just cool. So yeah, so that can be, if there's enough interest in the Rivers app and how we could use, your chapter could use that to help with some of this prioritization, would love to do, a targeted training on that one. Maybe even in person if it was late enough in the year. I don't know how many of you all, I'm finally fully vaccinated, so super excited about that. But as people feel safe, maybe we could get together and do something. So, that first step is fill the gaps. Another key thing is identifying partners is something we've identified, or something we've used to really kind of help build these projects. So, TU chapters, you all are awesome. You're doing great. You're bringing money in. You have volunteers, but at some point you reach a capacity by yourself. And so identifying partners that can help you, be it collecting data or getting projects on the ground, bringing money in, having that list of partners and getting them involved early has been really key to seeing watershed improvement happen. And again, you all know these people. If I asked, you could probably spit out 5 different names, Save Our Saluda, all these different groups that are there. But one of them, bringing everybody together and giving everybody a seat at the table and facilitating that partnership is a real key aspect to making watershed improvement happen. Become additive. This is just something where, make sure as you're approaching this, you're working with, your agencies, you're working with your agency personnel, and you're helping them get more done than they can do on their own. And this is just kind of something I mention every time. Sometimes it's like we want to go to the DNR and say, okay, what can we do? A lot of times that's actually putting more on their plate at first, and they just kind of get frustrated and say, well, we don't have time to, do this. What I mean by become additive is, use your knowledge, use your identification, use that data collection and say, here's what we want to do. We want to improve sedimentation on the lower Saluda. Oh, and we have these places all marked. What do you think about us working on some of that? That's kind of an additive approach where you're saying, we've already taken this on. We've already identified some of these problems at first pass. Why don't you tell us which 3 you want us to work on? Oh, and then we're going to work with our partner over here to come up with the plan. And all you have to do is look at the plan and say, yeah, that's great. Really work on becoming additive in these projects. There's just the reality of, agencies, they want to get a lot done, but they're super limited in the amount of time and money they have. And so if you can start bringing to the table, not just saying, hey, we're going to provide funding, but like, hey, we want to work on this. That can be a really big step to getting more done in watershed improvement. Next pivot point is think big. So this is something I've struggled with my entire life. I feel like sometimes I look at, I want to get something done or I want to work on a project, and I kind of let we don't have this amount of money, to get this done. I know it's going to take this, so much work. And but honestly, setting a big vision, and maybe even at the chapter board level, sitting down as a board and saying, what difference do we want to make? It's not going to be, we're not going to get this done in 2 years. We're not even going to get this done in 10 years. But think big. We want to reduce sedimentation in the lower Saluda. We want to reduce it in half, by 10 times. Set a big vision with a big goal. Because I think that really provides a lot of motivation to start looking and saying, we want to make a huge difference. And the follow-up to that, so again, looking at these watershed improvements, just throw that picture back up there. Think big. We want to reduce all that sedimentation on that map and get rid of 3 AOPs or, severe barriers there. That's a huge vision for that little thing. we're talking 40, 50 of these types of projects. Think big, but then start small. So just because your ultimate goal might cost $1 million, sometimes it's the $3,000 first step that gets that ball rolling. You go out, you do a live staking, and you start seeing an improvement. People start seeing you're getting stuff done. Identify some small pieces of that big picture and start working on those directly. So again, live staking is super simple. It doesn't necessarily require a lot of permitting or anything, but that can make a big difference as you work through a stream. And finally, just kind of a thing to remember, change just takes time. And that's something I think we all want to see things happen right away. We want to see all the work we put into it bring about some sort of change. But the reality is, when you're working with agencies, when you're having to do permitting, when you're wanting to see, stream banks held in by these new live stakes, well, they have to grow for a year. Just remember, change takes time, and celebrate those small victories along the way. And that's really kind of those steps that we lay out as we're looking at watershed improvements. And again, I could talk about a couple different things, but this is where I think hearing from Conor and what they've done on the Chattahoochee is going to provide even a better experience for you all, a better example of how a chapter is kind of launched into wanting to do something big and how they've been able to do that so far. So Conor, are you out there?
Hey Jeff, yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. How are we doing on time? How much time do you want to give me?
You have as much time as you need.
All right, let's start. I'll do like a 5 or 10 minute summary. I'll try to be brief, but we're talking about 2 years, and I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Conor Reynolds, past president of UCCTU. The chapter is located in a suburb within Atlanta. It was started back in 1983. And so, when I came in, there were some different ideas going on, but, a lot of well-established programs like Trout in the Classroom was going good. Project Healing Waters was going well. We had a women's fly fishing clinic, kids fly fishing clinic, launched Clean My Water, did a brook trout restoration in North Georgia. So we had a lot of good things going. And so I would say, every good conservation story and every project starts with a seed. And so different people plant seeds. And so I'll start with, the people that did start to plant the seed. So there is a guide on the Chattahoochee River. His name is Chris Scally. He's been guiding there for 25 years. And, we're talking about a tailwater where it's not natural, but it's created a cold water fishery that's produced some really nice brown trout, as well as Georgia DNR stocks rainbows. So you've got a really nice fishery, and you've got a guy who's been on the water every single day that he can get out there with clients. And so I would say Chris Scally planted the seed. He's like, we need some things going on the river. We got a lot of sedimentation issues. We've got a lot of people who are illegally dumping. We've got we don't have enough people on the water, taking care of it. And so you see that, and you hear those stories of Chris who he sees it day in and day out, and he sees the potential. And so he partners with Trout Unlimited. And so Chris and I kind of had a bunch of conversations just on the side, and he's like, wood is good. We could do like a wood project. We could rebuild a tributary. We could monitor bugs. He's got a great study where he's just monitored caddis and all different types of bugs on the river. And so he was throwing out all these ideas, when I was president, and so I took those in. I mentioned the sedimentation issue. That was huge. A lot of people recreate on the Chattahoochee River, and they just kind of complained about the sediment. Like, hey, the dam releases and the banks are sloughing, and it's backing up to so yeah, and so we knew that there was a problem going on there. And so And so Jeff kind of came along, Jeff Wright, and he also planted the seed, Embrace the Stream. And so that was kind of the missing piece in our whole chapter, I think. We had a lot of good things going on, but I was like, man, we aren't leading or even initiating a conservation initiative. And so it started there. And so Jeff planted the seed, Chris Scally planted the seed. And then all right, so what's going to be our idea? And so we had two competing priorities. We had the Chattahoochee River, which is a massive tributary in our, or not a massive tributary, but a massive tailwater in our backyard that produced wild brown trout as well as sustained rainbow trout. And then you look to North Georgia and you've got, brook trout habitat. So it supports the natives as well as a bunch of wild trout. So we had those two ideas, and we had a gentleman in our chapter who was really pushing for an idea up in North Georgia. So there was a Georgia DNR stream that was an old trophy trout stream, and he was really passionate about that idea, and he wanted to restore that whole area that had just gone to the wayside. Georgia DNR let it go, and he wanted to kind of revitalize that. So that was one big idea in North Georgia. We could definitely take that on and partner with another chapter. Then you had the Chattahoochee River, which is in our backyard. And this is where I think Jeff kind of helped us. Jeff was like, well, this is in your backyard. This is part of your DNA. This is part of your chapter's history. It might be better to lean towards the Chattahoochee River. And so ultimately, we had to make a tough decision, but we did go with the Chattahoochee River Restoration Project. And so what we did is we focused on a tributary. And so there was another decision point. So it's like, okay, you've got this massive tailwater that we're going to focus on. So where do you start? Do you focus on public water, which the National Park Service owns a lot of the property, or do you focus on the private water, so just private residents? And so we reached out to National Park Service, and they had a few tributaries that we started to investigate. So it's kind of to Jeff's point, you got to start looking over, turning over some stones, figuring out, all right, where are we going to focus our time and energy on? So Georgia DNR then came on to the project, and they started helping us think about some different studies they had done on the Chattahoochee River, as well as impacted areas from where they stock, as well as some sedimentation issues that are impacting those stocking areas. And so we kind of narrowed it down into two areas. One is right at the beginning of the tailwater, which is Buford Dam. That's where that cold water is first coming in. A lot of bugs, a lot of activity there, a lot of brown trout activity. And then down below, we had another tributary called Crayfish Creek. And ultimately, what we kind of landed on was the first tributary coming in near Buford Dam was a bigger tributary. And so it was going to be a big bite to take off. So it was going to be about $1 million project, maybe up to $5 million. So we kind of backtracked it there, and we went down to this other tributary, which was unnamed at the time, but it was known as Crayfish Creek, and that one was a smaller tributary. And so what we did is we focused on that smaller tributary, because if we started there and we did a good job and demonstrated what we wanted to do, which was basically to take the degrading banks and reslope those and reduce the sediment to help the brown trout spawning area right below the tributary. So if we could start there, then, and we did a good job, then what we could do is replicate that model into those bigger tributaries, and then kind of just, it almost be like a domino effect after that. So we started at Crayfish Creek, and the Park Service helped us make that decision. So we partnered with the Park Service. Also, Embrace the Stream encourages chapters to partner with other chapters. So we partner with the Oconee River chapter, and they have really good ties with the University of Georgia. So when we partnered with Oconee River, we also partnered with a few professors who are fisheries biologists, and then also UGA Five Rivers. So they all kind of came on board, and so it kind of grew from there. And so then we needed to write a grant, so we needed to do the Embrace the Stream grant. So that was a new thing for us. We had no idea what we were doing, and we learned And we also got some good feedback from Tom Innes, who is the Southeastern Embrace the Stream coordinator. So he helped us with writing that grant and really helping us make it successful. And so ultimately, we did get the Embrace the Stream grant. And then from that whole process, we were able to replicate that grant and tailor it for other grants. And so, from the Embrace the Stream process, we've gone after NIFWIF grants. We've gone after some other grants. And so overall, we've raised some good funds. And then also, the Embrace the Stream challenge, once you're kind of in on the Embrace the Stream, you've written your grant, you get the grant, whatever the funds may be, then there's a challenge. And so that's where we then reach back out to our community partners. So River Through Atlanta, Chris Scally, the guy that I was talking about that planted that seed, helped us do a bunch of fundraising. And then we partner with a bunch of our other networks, so the shops. So Alpharetta Outfitters, Fishhawk, Orvis, Unicoi, we just partner with those folks to really take this idea, give them a write-up and say, hey, look, we're trying to raise funds for a good cause. We have a 1-week time frame to raise funds through Embrace the Stream Challenge. And so our strategy was to take that and then pass it off to our partners and then them share with their networks. And so basically you can increase your amount of impact. And so we were able to raise like $20,000 in a week through that Embrace the Stream Challenge. And that was really just the community support that we had. And so it's really blossomed from there. And I'll stop there and see, Jeff, if you want to fill in any of the gaps or if there's any questions, at this point. But I think that's a good stopping place for now.
Yeah, Conor, one thing. So it started with Embrace the Stream, and I think you guys got like 7 or 8 from the Embrace the Stream before the challenge. How much money have you brought in now through additional grants and stuff?
Yeah, so we start off with like 7, and then we got 7,000 through Embrace the Stream. Then we raised 20,000 through the Embrace the Stream Challenge. That was up to like 27. And then we got 50,000 through NIFWIF. And then we got some education funds from NRCF. So that's some additional funds. And then we also have a lot of in-kind contributions. So we had an engineering firm called Columbia Engineering, and they helped us with our design. And they quoted at like 10,000 in kind, but I would say overall it's probably more than that. I would say it's about 20. So, in kind was huge. I mean, Park Service is putting their hours into it. They're not charging us or anything like that. So, overall we're well over 100. And then you add in the in kind. So, I would say overall close to 150 to 200. University of Georgia is helping out a bit as well. So yeah, it's, once, to Jeff's point, if you think big, you start small, you get some good partners around you, and you kind of keep growing that idea. What eventually happens is it kind of grows, organically a bit. And so, we've seen some interesting partners come in. So the city of Sugar Hill owns that little area. So they've kind of been a big partner. They helped us name the creek, Crayfish Creek. So that was a process we went through. And then Gwinnett County is going to help us take out some culverts, which is the county that it's in. There's 2 massive culverts. So a team of folks from Gwinnett County is going to come in and take that out for free. So so we've been able to work with local municipalities to help out as well.
Now, after you get your funds and your grants, what sort of permitting process did you have to go through?
Yeah. So we had to go through Army Corps of Engineers. They kind of that's the domain for the Chattahoochee River, and so the Park Service helped us submit for that. So that was a big permit. It was a 404 permit. Then the Columbia Engineering, we're in the process of getting the local permits, but that's like the buffer variance. They're going to help us with that. And so the permitting process is tough. And that's where you want to lean on your partners. So we actually reached out to the Pisgah chapter, and again, this was just organically. Like, we just reached out to Pisgah chapter and the Rocky River chapter. They had an Embrace the Stream project, and we just had a few calls with them, and they had mentioned how they're partnering with the Forest Service. And with the Forest Service, if you go with something like that, the permitting process isn't like your typical permitting process. If the Forest Service wants to do something, I think the permitting process is really straightforward. You partner with the Forest Service and they can kind of do as they please. There is some formalities, but it's easier with the Forest Service. If you go the non-Forest Service route, then you're working with some other agencies, and that's where you definitely want to work with some different partners that can help navigate through those permits.
And Conor, you guys just did a work day, a couple months ago, though, that you didn't need permits for it was just like invasive species removal, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the stuff we've done kind of creative things. So I mentioned Georgia DNR was involved early on, and they still are. What we did with them is we had this public work day. This was right before the pandemic in March, and they came out and they did shocking, they did fish sampling, and we just had 70 people come out, and we just did a monitoring day just to figure out what's in the creek. And that you don't need a permit for that. You just need a partnership with DNR. And that way you kind of learn about the stream. We set up a stream monitoring site, which it takes temperature, turbidity. We got that through Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, and they did the whole permitting for that. It's just a research permit. And then the invasive species, Jeff, to your point, we did 3 or 4 of those. All we have to do is just ask the Park Service if we can do that, and then National Park Service will let us come out, and we'll take out those invasive species. So there's a handful of things you can do without a permit. But whenever you start disturbing land and stabilizing banks and things like that, you definitely do need the permits.
And I will say, Georgia, I don't know South Carolina's permitting landscape as well, but Georgia is actually more complicated than North Carolina or Tennessee in terms of what's required for some of the lower level, live staking and bank reshaping. Georgia has a little more rigorous local permitting than those 2 states. So that's something to just look into for South Carolina. Anyway, I'll stop interrupting. Does anybody else have any other kind of questions you have for either one of us?
Yeah, I had a question, guys. Hey, I'm Will. I guess my biggest struggle with it, I'm the vice president of our chapter, is, say you want to do a bank restoration on one of our tributaries. How do you go about figuring out the scientific process to do that properly? Because while I think that's great, I wouldn't even know where to start to begin that bank restoration. Any ideas? Did y'all just consult your local expert?
Yeah.
Some rules set or what?
Yeah. So once you figure out if you're gonna do public or private, because that's kind of a big decision point. If you have a private landowner and he's got a big problem, that's kind of an easy thing. You got a problem, so you got to find a solution. So that's one avenue. The other avenue is going through Forest Service or Park Service or another landowner, and then working with them to think through ideas. Just having a meeting with them to say we know this is a problem. We know sediment is a problem on this river. So where do you see some of the biggest issues? And so that call that we had was with Park Service, DNR, and TU. And we named one huge tributary that came into the Beaufort Dam area. And that's where Georgia DNR and Park Service and anyone recreating that was a big problem area, because those fish that they're stocking, that's a resource. And so they don't want sediment entering the river there. So that was one area where you could really gain some traction. But that tributary is really expensive. So then we went down to another tributary, which is a little bit smaller, more manageable, still on Park Service land. DNR still cares about that area. And so that's where we kind of landed on, which is something more manageable. And so I think that's where you kind of want to start small, and you want to work with your partners to kind of identify an area that they, they.
Am I the only one not hearing Connor?
Yeah, Connor, I think you got muted.
You're muted, Connor.
Hey,
There you go.
hey, sorry, did I lose you guys?
Yeah.
Hey, but yeah, basically, yeah, you just want to work with your partners to like, Park Service or Forest Service or whoever that landowner is to like identify that area that you guys can all focus on and then start working through this, that solution. So once you've identified like the problem, the area you want to kind of correct, then you got to work through, how are we going to do this? What are some solutions? What are some ways we can work, we can navigate, the permitting if we need any, or, solutions. And so it's definitely case by case basis, but I would say like access would be one. Like if it's a good area for fishing, but there's no access, you could build access. That's kind of one. Bank stabilization is another, big problem on most rivers. Invasive species is a big problem. So, those are some ideas, if you guys were thinking about doing a project, maybe start looking at the Saluda River and finding those areas where, it could be improved or enhanced.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, you've got University of South Carolina sitting there, a couple of these universities. I see Sierra Hilton just said that they have some resources as well. The Riverkeeper Alliance, that's where you have to realize no matter what, we're never going to be experts on everything. And that's why those partnerships really matter. Like Andy and I can do a little low level consultation on sedimentation, but when it gets complicated, that's where we'd even be reaching out to these other groups to work on that together.
Yeah, I mean, even the Pisgah chapter, like their stronghold was the U.S. Forest Service. There's a gentleman at the Forest Service who's done multiple projects. And then I think they also work with Andy. So.
It happened again, Connor.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, you gotta build those partnerships with those subject matter experts for sure. I mean, that's key.
All right, appreciate it.
Well, yeah, if we don't have any other questions, I just thought Connor's story with Upper Chattahoochee, that group there, just really applicable to kind of the Saluda River area as well. You might not have the National Park Service right there, but I'm sure you have city parks. You have, there's some public land, but also, it might be worth reaching out to private landowners where you see problems, helping them see, why do you want even an education effort to say, well, why do you not want to mow right up to the edge of a stream bank? Could make a big difference in an area, convincing people to have appropriate stream buffers, no permits needed, not super expensive, just getting out and saying, we just thought it'd be good to talk to you all about this. There's lots of those different little steps along the path. But just wanted you to see, just like you all have a grassroots led effort down in suburban Atlanta where they've brought in, it's going to end up being hundreds of thousands of dollars to rectify, the situation on Crayfish Creek. And they're going to be able to tell a story there and move on to that bigger trib and then move on to the next trib. And this is going to be a long-term investment. That honestly, the city of Atlanta is going to be like, hey, look what this chapter at TU started. So just something really cool that, we can see these big project ideas and say, man, that's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of money, but it's still, maybe it's not doable. Maybe in the long run, it's not doable to make the big objective, but there's all these little pieces along the way where we can be making a difference. So just kind of wanted to share that and share Conor's story so you all could kind of maybe, maybe be able to look at your landscape and say, you know what, our big picture is this, but here are 3 little steps that we could take right now to be working on it. And again, I'm here to help. Would love to help with the river survey, help you all learn that one. Even come down and see some of your areas and maybe could help start talking about the partnership aspect. I feel like that's something I've learned a lot about over the last 3 years. Have some experience there as well. So, but thanks everybody for listening to us and sticking with us here and investing in the cold water conservation that Trout Unlimited does.
Yes, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Conor. It's nice to see something that's analogous to what we have, a major tail race section of the river, beautiful brook trout streams to the north of us that that seems like a major focus for sure, where a lot of the conservation effort happens up in the upstate. But to see that a tail race fishery, we can do those major conservation projects and use things like embrace a stream to our advantage. Gives me hope. Definitely. I do think the TU Rivers app and doing the river surveys, I'm interested in that. I know Sierra said she's interested in that. I think anytime we're able to mobilize our members and anytime they're on the river, if they can use that and be trained on it a little bit, I think that's definitely important. I think there's going to be a major interest in that. So hopefully we can schedule something in the future for a training event on that. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to the meeting? No?
Just wanted to say thanks for all y'all are doing and really great stuff there in Atlanta. And hopefully we can have some of those stories here soon.
Yeah,
All right, y'all.
definitely. Yeah, I would definitely encourage you guys to have Jeff come do a walk. He did the same thing for us in Atlanta, and I think Jeff's a great resource. So definitely grab some of his time if he's available, and maybe Andy. But yeah, utilize Jeff, and I think you guys will be successful with an Embrace the Stream program.
Well, Jeff, I think you're going to have to make a trip to the capital city.
Yeah,
I know you're a little stretched thin, but
no, I definitely can make some time. I'm only, I think, 3 hours away from you all. I live in Elizabethton, Tennessee. So closer than going to Atlanta. Probably less traffic too, right? So.
Yes, definitely. Most of the time. Well, I appreciate y'all for being our speakers tonight. I know that's given me a lot of hope, and hopefully that's gotten a bunch of our members' minds going. I will be posting this video, this meeting recording up to YouTube and sharing it, so anybody that missed, make sure they know about it. And remember, this upcoming Sunday, we will be doing a river cleanup at the Saluda River Walk parking lot. Meet us there, get your gear, and help pick up some garbage, and hopefully we can start looking at some problem areas on the Saluda and maybe identifying a project that we can do here in the future. So appreciate everybody for sharing their time with us tonight, and I appreciate our speakers for sharing the information they had.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Have
Thanks,
a good night,
Jacob.
everyone.
Good night, everybody.